Woodsong by Gary Pualsen, Day 6. In the dark, we roar wildly through some trees that come so close to the trail the sled seems hardly to fit through. Twice I am knocked off the sled and scramble back on, then we climb up a frozen riverbed and waterfall in the dark. The dogs jump up from boulder to boulder, and I hang beneath the sled at one point with my feet out in the open space, and suddenly we come out in the burn. We were warned about the burn. It is a 90-mile wide stretch of broken country where a forest fire took everything out. For some reason, there is often not very much snow in the burn, and this year is no exception. Just as it gets dark, I look out across the vast expanse of rocks and dirt and dead grass and burned trees fallen across one another, and no snow, not a flake as far as I can see. The dogs are still fresh, having slept a full day, and they don't care that there is no snow for the sled runners. It's all the same to them, and I have to run them. Inside half a mile, I'm in trouble. The dogs run beneath a burned tree, and the sled jams. I cannot back them up, so I take a small bow saw and cut through the tree, which allows the sled to escape. I barely grab on as it explodes forward to the next tree, and the sled jams, and I cut through the tree again. All through the dark night, we slam from tree to tree, with me dragging on my face half the time, bouncing off rocks and dirt, while the dogs, resting each time I must cut a tree, stay fresh and powerful and lunging. It is chaos. I have not rested well, and the hallucinations start about midnight. And I have the same man in the trench coat on the sled for a time, talking to me about educational grants, until I tell him to shut up and leave, and he becomes indignant. I learned that night how powerful the hallucinations can be. In a rare moment when the sled is on smooth ground, I come across a clearing, and a dog team is stopped ahead of me. All the dogs are asleep, spread out across the grass, and one of the other mushers in the race is leaning over the empty sled with a fist raised. "Get out of the sled or I'll kill you," he is saying. When I stopped in back of him and ask what is wrong, he points down to the empty sled. "It's this man. I've carried him for over 200 miles, and he won't help push up the hills. I am sick of him. I'm going to leave him here in the burn." We talk a bit, and he relaxes and realizes he's hallucinating. But as I leave, I hear him say loudly again, "Get out of my sled!" And I think as we go that perhaps it is not real, and I am hallucinating about a man having hallucinations. And that, in turn, triggers the thought that perhaps all of it, the burn, the race, the dogs, my life, all of it in the whole world is just a hallucination. My brain is running wild with this thought when the dogs stop, and I look up and there is an enormous bull buffalo standing in front of my leader, smelling his head. I stare at it for a long time. The man in the trench coat is back on my sled, and the buffalo is standing there. My befuddled brain simply thinks it's another hallucination, and I wait for it to disappear. It doesn't. I try to hush the man on the sled because I'm worried he will anger the buffalo. I have never seen an angry buffalo, even in a hallucination, and I don't want to start now. The buffalo seems as big as a house, but it slowly seeps into my thinking, like mud warming, that the dogs would not have stopped for my hallucination. It is a real buffalo. There is a herd of real buffalo in the burn, and this bull stands looking down on my leader, Wilson, who is very sweet and a wonderful dog, but dumber than a walnut smelling him. I call the dogs up, and they go around the bull, and I'm surprised when the man on the sled says nothing, though we pass not 4 feet from the buffalo, and could easily touch it. The buffalo does nothing to us, is very mellow. I hear later that another musher fell asleep in the burn next to his sled. His dogs are resting, and when he woke up, the buffalo was standing over him, straddling him, smelling the breath as it came out of his nostrils. Buffalo, he says, when he tells of it, there is strangely no fear in his voice, have very bad breath. The burn finally becomes too much. I am going across a large clearing, several miles across, and it starts to snow, and the wind kicks up, until I cannot see the dogs, only the front end of the sled now and then, and I have no idea where the trail is supposed to be. Wilson loses his way and begins to wander. Since there is no trail to follow, he works around in a large circle to the right and heads off into the bush, and I don't know anything of this until we come into a box canyon and cannot proceed any farther, and I know we have lost the trail. We have run perhaps 30 or 40 miles off the trail, and to compound the problem, the wind and driving snow have quickly covered our tracks, so we cannot easily find our way back, and I cannot begin to think. I sink down to my knees next to the sled in a kind of surrender. When I look up, my friend is there. The Eskimo man, who helped me when I was sick, is there, and he takes Wilson by the back of his harness and drags the team around, and I stand on the sled, and we start. I do not know where we are going, but I have great confidence in the man with the curving shoulders and gentle smile, and I think that if we move slowly, just keep moving, he will not let me down. Hours pass, and each time I hesitate, he shows up, next to the team and waves me on. I keep going, against the wind and snow, until I look down and see sled tracks. They are filling fast, so they must be very fresh. I call the dogs to increase speed, and we run through the rest of the darkness, and at dawn I see a cabin, which signals the end of the burn. I wish I could thank the man who saved me again, but he is gone. It is the end of day 6. Day 7. In and out of a checkpoint, a village named Nikolai. It is very crowded with snowmobiles roaring by and resting teams all around, so I don't stay. The wind stops and the sun comes out. Everything again is steeped in beauty as I run down a river and over some large hills, and we come around a corner in the brush, run up off the river, and there is a bar. In the middle of nowhere, a man suddenly appears and asks me if I want a beer. I say no, I don't drink, and he gives me a soda instead. It tastes incredibly wonderful, and I drink it down in one long swallow. While I am turned away, he throws 3 more sodas in my sled. It is a very nice thing to do, except that I don't see him do it, and leave the checkpoint without knowing the sodas are there. They settle down on top of my booties in the booty sack, and that night it gets 40 or 50 below, and the cans of soda freeze and burst. The next day it gets warm again. The sodas thaw and run into the cloth booties and refreeze in the cloth. Later that day, Wilson cuts his foot, and I go to get a booty for him, and find they are frozen in soda slush. I thaw one in my armpit and put one on his foot, and we start off. Wilson smells the soda. If it smells interesting, he thinks, it must taste good. Soon he's running on 3 legs, sucking on his foot, and that's the way I pass a team, which is resting, with my leader running on 3 legs, sucking a foot. The musher just nods and watches Wilson run by. We run all day on a beautiful trail, down some long, long hills into a checkpoint, where a beautiful blonde girl hands me a cup of hot chocolate. It is not possible for anything to taste as good as that hot chocolate tastes, and I drink it slowly, trying to make it last. I leave the checkpoint in the dark. The land has flattened into long hills like ocean swells, and the wind has died down, and the team runs well through the night while I stand on the back, lost in hallucinations again. This time, I see crowds of people cheering for me. Some of them are riding snowmobiles, and some are out of cabins to wave, and I can see their families inside the cabin sitting at tables, and twice I have to move quickly on the sled to keep from being nudged by snowmobiles when they come close to wave at me. None of it is real. Dawn comes, and we are in the interior of Alaska. So different, it's like another planet. No trees, only tundra, and the long, low hills, and the jingle of the dogs' collars, and the whuffing of their breath as they trot, and we cover the miles, the long miles across the interior, over the Yukon River. It is the end of day 7.